from electric vehicles, solar panels to future innovations, the global shift towards clean energy is fueling the surging demand for critical minerals like cobalt, lithium, nickel, copper, and rare earth minerals. Africa's resource-rich nations stand at the forefront of this transformation, uniquely positioned to not only supply these essential resources, but also drive regional economic growth. According to the International Energy Agency, Sub-Saharan Africa alone holds around 30% of the world's proven critical mineral reserves. I'm Nastasia Arenta, and in today's broadcast, we'll explore shaping the future of minerals and how Africa can play a pivotal role in the global energy transition. Joining me for more is Aldo Panini. He's a Director of Strategy and Program, including content at the Future Minerals Forum. Shortly, in a bit, we'll have Dr. Michelle Foss, who's a Fellow in Energy, Minerals and Materials for Energy Studies at the Baker Institute for Public Policy at Rice University. On your screen is Mark Kudifani. He's the chairman of Vale Base Metals. And then we have Patrick Barnes. He is the vice president and head of metals and mining at Mackenzie Wood. However, let's get into that conversation. And I'm going to start off with you, Aldo. I mean, we have this report that is quite interesting, but it's also coming in the lead up to the Future Minerals Forum. Before we actually talk about the report and what that report entails, including some of the findings, let's set the scene here in terms of what the Future Minerals Forum is all about and how that ties into Saudi's Vision 2030.
Thank you, Nastasia, and it's good to see you, and thank you for the contribution of fellow panelists. The Future Minerals Forum arose from the Saudi Vision 2030, and we kicked off in 2022, bringing together leaders from industry as well as governments to try and tackle some of the key challenges facing the minerals sector, particularly as it will play an incredibly important role in delivering the minerals, not just for development, future development, industrial development, particularly in the region of Africa, but also for the energy transition. So we are kicking off a conversation around the importance of minerals for that future. In 2024, this conversation has grown since 2022. In 2024, we had 75 governments join us for a ministerial roundtable where they agreed to undertake work on three broad fronts. One is to work out how the world could work better together to deliver these minerals, so developing a strategy. Second, how we build capacity in these new emerging markets or regions, particularly Africa, so that they're prepared to deliver these minerals. And third, an initiative around sustainability and how we can better reflect local realities in the supply of minerals in a responsible way. And so what FMF has become in those few short years is really a leading global conversation around mineral supply. And the report that we're talking about today is an extension of that conversation where we try and tackle some of the key issues that we'll come to in a minute.
Right, let me come to you here, Mark. I mean, when it comes to the conversations that have taken place at the Future Minerals Forum, and you've attended some of those conversations over the years, have you seen them evolve, especially when it comes to the concept of, value addition, or even when we look at shared value propositions?
Thanks for the question. I think the most important thing that we've seen over the years, probably in the last 5 years, is the focus on critical minerals has opened up a debate around the role of mining in society more generally. It's involved a lot more stakeholders, which I think is a very positive thing. And it's focused the debate on, as well as developing mines, how do we make sure that the development of mines results in the development of communities, regions, and countries in the broader sense. And so I think it's a much broader conversation looking at mining and its role in supporting energy transition, but development more broadly, particularly in Africa and other resource-rich environments. So it's become a broader, more inclusive conversation. I think that's a very positive thing.
Let me stay with you when it comes to my next question, because we've come from an industry mindset which the report describes as extract and ship mindset. And the industry is finding itself at a turning point, which is what you're alluding to as well in your response. Do you find that we're finding more industry participants, more of your peers wanting to change this mindset in order to shift those perceptions?
Yes, I think people are becoming, let me frame the point a little bit differently. In the past, I think many leaders in the industry tended to try and keep a low profile because with the amount of investment involved in mining, you were sometimes a bit of a lightning rod to that concept of development and the environmental trade-offs. Whereas today, I think more mining leaders are stepping forward and seeing the opportunities that they can work through with local communities, because we need local communities to see us as partners, and we want them to benefit from the development of the mines. We've got to make sure we do that with them. And it's not a matter of engagement, it's involvement. They've said, look, we don't want to be engaged, we want to be involved. And what I've found over the years is the more you involve the local communities, the more they're part of the design of the solutions that we put together, the more they own the developments and the better outcomes for all. So, yes, the profile's improving, leaders are stepping up, but we've got a lot more to do.
We'll come back to you in a bit, Mark, and explore your part of the report, which the viewers will find quite interesting. However, Patrick, I'm going to shift to you here because Mark brought in the idea of opportunities. And this brings me to the part of the report that looks at targeting opportunities within the mineral value addition. In a time where we're dealing with, geopolitical tension, we're dealing with supply chains that are shifting, how is the idea of value addition suddenly re-emerging? When you look back at some of the work that you've done in your research, what has been the kickstarter for this re-emergence of the idea around value addition?
I think there's a number of drivers. First of all, it's been a big topic for a long time, especially in resource-rich countries with colonial history. There's always been this concern with the mine and ship or pit to port kind of approach that a lot of countries have perceived has been the case, and so there's always been a big appetite for it. But with this shifting in supply chains that you referred to, and this effort to de-risk supply chains and in parallel accelerate the energy transition, that actually represents an opportunity for a lot of investment, not just in mines, but in the midstream and in the downstream of some of these minerals. And most countries, not just what we might call developing countries or others, but Canadian provinces, Australia, everybody's looking much harder at capturing their share of that big wave of investment that's required, and at the same time furthering their geopolitical and development goals. So it's partly just a lot of different forces converging at the right moment, and it represents an opportunity to possibly change the way that the development pathway has been for a lot of these countries.
Let me come to you, Aldo. It's quite interesting, as you were telling us, in terms of a little bit more detail around the Future Minerals Forum. A lot of people would be thinking, well, okay, given the fact that we've been talking about the energy transition, the fact that we've been talking about value addition, as Mark touched on as well, in convening the Future Minerals Forum, was there a gap in terms of having one place to have all the stakeholders come through and actually flesh out some of the issues that are playing out, especially when we bring in the idea of value addition and the energy transition in the space of critical minerals?
Anastasia, I think the gap has been in our conversation in this part of the world. And when I say this part of the world, I'm referring to the whole of Africa, Western Asia and Central Asia, what we deem the super region. This is a part of the world that's smack bang in the middle between East and West. It straddles North and South, some 9,000 kilometers from Cape Town all the way through the steppes of Central Asia, 79 countries. And this conversation has been lacking. The Future Minerals Forum fills that gap, and we've been fortunate to attract the industry leaders such as Mark and his peers, as well as government. So one of the key things of this forum is bringing government and the corporate world together. which normally that's quite a challenge, but they are vital actors in solving the challenges that face the mineral sector and the world more broadly, right? So when we talk about investment, we talk about production, we talk about value addition. That's all based on partnerships, and you'll hear the word partnerships and collaboration a lot. The challenge is how we make that work in practice and effectively. The role that the Future Minerals Forum can play is to enable those sort of conversations, bring the right people together, and help them map out a way forward on some of these key challenges. So we will be delving deeper in 2025 on each of the points or the topics that are outlined in the report.
We'll get to the idea of collaboration in a bit. Mark, I want to shift to you and look at when we talk about shaping the future of minerals, and let's talk about what's in your space in the mining industry. What do you take into consideration, especially when you bring in the idea of defining commercial frameworks? What exactly do we mean when we talk about those commercial frameworks?
Yeah, so when we're looking at developing a business, let's say a mine, or looking at developing the downstream elements or the supply chains that come, we look at each area and say, okay, what infrastructure is available? In developing a mine, we will naturally bring, and we need, access to water. So how do we develop access to water in a way that supports the mine? But at the same time, how might we develop that water infrastructure to support local communities? And there's a great example of that type of thinking at the Elephant's Dam development in South Africa. Energy, same. Transportation, a whole range of other services, including health, education, supporting communities development, and then providing local opportunities for jobs. And all of that infrastructure is developed around the primary mining activity. So mining, first step and downstream processing. And that's where the big step benefits occur in those communities that don't have much infrastructure from the starting point. When you look at further downstream processing, there's a lot more investment required for incrementally less benefit in those communities in the short term. And so what we say is, well, let's take that first big step, get the broad-based infrastructure in place, but smelters and refineries need low-cost energy and a whole range of different skill sets that take more time to be put in place. And if you do it too early, you may actually get the timing wrong and create a facility that can't compete on a global basis. And so you've wasted that investment. So one of the big challenges is, how do you stage developments that work for the community, work for the regional development, and work for the government, but at the same time don't go too fast and create assets that can't compete. And there's a real, I think, opportunity to trade off between countries as well. So, for example, in Saudi Arabia, lots of low-cost energy, processing materials at relatively low cost. So if they're sourcing from countries in Africa, how can we help them talk and work out how to share that value that works for both countries without limiting the future potential of the mining-based suppliers to develop their own industries over time as it's appropriate? So I've sort of captured a fair bit in that comment. I'll quieten down and let my colleagues on the panel say more.
Yeah, I want to stay with you. I mean, given what you've just described, do we then take that approach and sort of marry it together with the 7 pillars that you talk about as it relates to sustainability and the success in mining and minerals development? Do we look at those in the same lens, or are these two different aspects here?
They all fit together, and I should probably define the 7 lenses very quickly. For a business to be sustainable in mining, and sustainability is an economic concept. It's not simply ESG. ESG is a subset of sustainability, but safety, environment, social performance, having the right people to build the business, replacing resources and reserves for production, having low unit operating costs, and having a balance sheet that is being able to support the development, they all fit together. And how you develop the assets over time has to link in with those 7 pillars of sustainability. So it's a bigger concept. It's one that you've got to work through from a country level to a regional level, back down to the local level. And I think the Minerals Forum is a wonderful opportunity to bring all the key players together. And as Patrick said, talk about how we connect those dots and make sure that each country is on the right pathway that it determines for itself and that we can support.
And just building on what Mark has just mentioned here in terms of the 7 pillars, for those of you who will get a chance to read this report as we build up to the Future Minerals Forum, just picking 2 or 3 of these pillars, it talks about environmental protections, it talks about talent pools to support the industry, but not forgetting the social performance with the industry seen as a partner. Patrick, I'm going to come to you here because we spoke about the shifting supply chains. We've spoken about the re-emergence of value addition. But the one thing we also pick up, and I think your part of the report touches on this, are the policies to promote value addition seem to be struggling. Why is that?
Ooh, that's the $1 million question, right? And thanks for the opportunity to talk about, just to scratch the surface of that. And I think Mark introduced that quite nicely, because a lot of it comes down to timing, right? It comes down to sequencing, and it comes down to not fighting against economic realities, right? I feel a little bit like I'm here preaching that skinny jeans are still in fashion because comparative advantage is not very popular at the moment, right? It's not having a good decade. But the reality is you can't ignore it, right? And there are good reasons why the pendulum is swinging away from that and towards nearshoring and towards local value addition. But I think one of the reasons why that tends not to work is because people, a lot of times those policies are very aspirational and they're very broad brush, right? And a particular country might have the right ingredients for value addition in one commodity, one mined commodity, but completely not in the other. I mean, Mark mentioned a few of those, but for some things, the key ingredient might be affordable green energy. For another, it might be affordable, reliable water. For another, it might be what we call reactants and reagents is the biggest cost driver, right? And if you don't have a petrochemicals industry yet, it doesn't matter what your policy says, it's not going to work, right? You're not going to have mines or your processing facilities that are profitable enough to where tax incentives would even work, right? There's no income to offset with tax holidays or incentives or whatever it may be. And so what we see very often with our clients in both the public sector and the private sector that are looking at what they can do in country, if they don't understand what ingredients they have and what they can do to develop the next ingredient, just like what Mark was saying, there's things they can do now, almost always, right? And then there's things that it would take a few more building blocks that they can attack in order to earn the next stage, right? And if they do that a little bit more tactfully, with more prioritization in which segments they're going after, I think they'll be a lot more successful. Now, I'm not stupid, right? I mean, every minister in the world has to have a very strong statement about requiring value addition, but how far can they go in terms of requiring or pushing or pulling for value addition on specific commodities might be very different for them than it is for their next door neighbor, which again comes back to the point of the super region, right? As a group, a lot of these countries have a real shot at the moment at stitching together something that could be really transformative for the super region.
Before we talk about, those opportunities within the super region, you brought in something here, Patrick. You touched in about, the ministers here. And what we find is that you have the mining ministers as well as the finance ministers who are under increasing pressure to deliver or at least increase that local value addition. Do you find that when you're interacting with your clients, it's getting a little bit easier, i.e. they're able to navigate the terrain, or is it still a little bit murky out there?
I would say it's mixed, right? It depends on the ministers, right? It depends on their experience in the mining sector. Some of them have very broad portfolios. It's not very fair to expect them to be experts on electricity and hydrogen mining and oil and gas and petrochemicals and all the things that they have on their plate, plus all the domestic issues that they're dealing with, right? And so I think there are a number of them that I think are really starting to appreciate this. They are, being more cautious. We have, some clients that I think are doing quite interesting work, understanding what ingredients they have and what those enablers are, which ones they control and which ones they have to go talk to their peer about, working together, some kind of a clustering opportunity to make that happen. We are seeing a number of countries that are starting to differentiate themselves in their ability to speak, face to face, to speak reality, to be credible in terms of what they're saying to mining companies. And at the same time, that makes them much more capable to negotiate, right, effectively with those companies and, get that mix of collaboration and negotiation right.
Elder, I'm going to come to you here. If my math serves me correctly, I think we're in the 4th year of the Future Minerals Forum, going into year number 5, if I'm not mistaken, but do feel free to correct me there on my math. When we're having these discussions and watch how they've evolved over the years, and we talk about having these discussions, turning into action. The people in the room, the ministers and the stakeholders and these multi-stakeholders that we've been touching on over the past, 20 minutes or so, what are they discussing? Can you give us a bit of an earshot in the room in terms of what the discussions entail and how are they thinking about things?
Thanks, Nastasia. We're going to our 4th edition and hopefully we'll get to our 5th. But the essence of the discussion amongst the governments has been to start with acknowledging the importance of coming together to talk about these things, right? And to coming together in number. And the frankness with which they engage, the genuine nature of the conversations is quite revealing. And also the message that's been coming out, or that came out early in the piece, was that we're happy to come together and talk about things, but we really need to focus on action. And what we've started over the last 2 or 3 years is to give shape to what action looks like. And so this report and the conversations we'll be having in 2025 aim to feed into all of that. And what I mean by action, as I was sort of alluding to earlier, if we're talking about how we bring the world together to tackle this global challenge of mineral supply, the rocks are the rocks, and as Ma would say, they are where they are. So we need to work collaboratively to produce them, to extract them, to then add value to them wherever it makes commercial sense, right? But that requires open borders, not closed borders. It requires global interaction, global trade links, not closing up trade flows. It requires security. It requires a whole range of issues that can addressing a whole range of challenges that can only be managed through these collaborative approaches. So coming up with a way of working amongst groups of countries that deliver tangible benefits to the local communities, whether it be through increased investment, the right type of investment, whether it means building capacity. And this is a really important one, because it's fine for governments to develop strategies and policies around the ambition of value addition or industrializing. But if some of these countries don't have the capabilities to get on that journey, whether it be through the need for developing the human capital, whether it be infrastructure, whether it be capital itself, a whole range of things need to come into place, as Mark and Patrick were alluding to, before they can start on that journey. So the journey might start by grouping together and building on that. And so the part of the work we're doing specifically is to develop a network of what we call centers of excellence. This is new. It aims to bring together the existing centers around Africa and other parts of the super region, universities, private public institutes, to build those capabilities, whether it be training the mining engineers of the future, and we're lacking those on a global level. We need more young people interested in the minerals industry as an industry of the future. This is a value that the Future Minerals Forum can add in terms of shifting perceptions of this great industry that's vital to the future of success of the planet in terms of prosperity, in terms of addressing the climate crisis by providing the minerals for renewable energy supply, electrification of production systems. Whatever it is required for the energy transition, will likely require minerals. That needs to be understood. And building on that, okay, well, how do we go about producing those in the amounts required? An estimate is that $5.4 trillion worth of investment is required by 2035. That's around the corner. How on earth are we going to unlock those funds unless we work together and are clear of where value can be extracted, and how commercially achievable or viable these mining and it's not just mining, by the way. It's also processing, and in some cases sort of further value addition, but those will be determined by the points market and commercial viability. So capacity building is key, and this whole issue around sustainability. What we need to understand there is that many of these supply regions are at different stages of development, right? So the important thing is that they get on the journey towards responsible supply. So we have to think about, is the system that we've currently got of rules and standards and so forth an enabler or a hindrance to some of that evolution of industrialization and provision of these minerals. So these are fundamental conversations that are taking place, and that's why we bring leaders together. We bring decision makers together to tackle these. And in 2025, we hope to make some tangible progress, practical progress across these three fronts that I just mentioned.
And let me stay with you. I mean, when we talk about whether the system is an enabler or a hindrance, are we getting closer and closer to that answer? Or am I putting you on the spot here when it comes to getting to what it actually is?
I think the important thing is getting on the journey towards sustainability. And by sustainability, we mean responsible supply. We mean, safeguarding the environment, maximizing social benefit, ensuring that policy regimes are reliable, stable, that there's proper governance that will give confidence to investors, right, and help de-risk. But we need to acknowledge that many countries are at different stages, and so long as they're on the journey and we're able to track that progress within realistic sort of standards, say, then that's a journey we need to get on. And the Future Minerals Forum is a helpful enabler of those sorts of conversations, and looking to, as I said earlier, bring government and industry, which don't normally talk very well with each other, to be honest with you. It's about bringing them together and finding common solutions. As obvious as that may seem, it doesn't often happen.
Right, Mark, I'm going to come to you here because, and obviously tap into your years of industry experience, having been in the business for so long. We talk about an industry, a mining industry that is facing a lot of challenges, and out of those challenges, 9 come to the forefront, and just a couple of those 9 is the maturity of assets, which the industry has been dealing with, supply chain dominance, competitiveness, etc., and also the idea around project cycle times. When you look at these 9 challenges, how are you and your industry peers thinking about them going forward?
If I could just make one point following Aldo, and I'll pick up the 9 points. I think in many ways the Future Minerals Forum is one of those antidotes for global fragmentation. The ability to meet people from all over the world in a very neutral environment, and I call neutral, and I mean that broadly, where we can all sit and talk about the future and how we play a part, I think is really important. And there aren't enough of these forums occurring today. So one hopes that we'll see a lot more of this and bring the world together as opposed to talking about fragmentation. So that, I think, is a really important point. Now, in terms of mining all around the world, on average, we're mining 40 meters deeper every year. And even if we bring on new mines, that sort of lowers the depth. But the problem is that the mines we are finding, or the ore bodies that we're finding, are much deeper. And so the structural cost base of the industry moves somewhere between 5 and 10% a year because of depth, because of grade, because of distance from infrastructure, the fact that the easier ore bodies have been found. So these are big issues that we have to deal with. And if we, the mining industry, can't improve our cost structures quicker than those numbers, i.e. the 5 to 10% a year, then the cost of life for everybody goes up, and it's significant. And so innovation, the ability to collaborate, Patrick used a terrible word, comparative advantage, the ability for the world to work together and make sure we're taking advantage of that comparative advantage is really important in terms of growing wealth for the world. And I'm talking about lifting people out of poverty. I'm talking about making sure people have got enough to eat, they've got water, they've got access to basic services, health, education. And so innovation is key. And how we mine at these increasing depths requires us to think very differently about mining in the future. And instead of attracting the best and brightest, most people or young people look at the industry and say, look, you guys have been around for 5,000 years. There are other more interesting industries that we can see, AI and other things. But what people forget is our task is becoming so much more difficult. So artificial intelligence, a whole range of new technologies are required for us to adapt and change what we do. And by the way, we'll be still doing what we're doing in 5,000 years on the basis that we don't create matter. Everything comes from the earth. That is, everything comes from mining. And some would say, wait a minute, we also grow stuff. But yes, we can't keep growing stuff if we don't put fertilizers back in to put the minerals in to encourage that plant growth. So again, everything comes from mining, and how we keep up with, reduce our costs and provide lower cost materials for everybody to use, then the world and the future is going to be a lot tougher for our children. And that's another point on the sustainability treadmill, if you like. We have to get ahead to make sure that we can create a better future for our kids.
Mark, let me stay with you here, and in a short bit, I'll go to Patrick, because Aldo mentioned a number that is quite staggering, saying that significant investments estimated at $5.4 trillion are required by 2035 in order to deal with the mining, refining, and infrastructure in order for us to be able to meet the growing materials demand. When we look at the industry's financing capacity, is there capacity for us to meet that deadline? 2035 is not far away, or are there still barriers here?
So in the industry today, there isn't the capacity to finance that development and growth if the world stays on the pathway it's staying on in terms of other activities. And defence spending would be an obvious one that comes to mind, given the challenges that the globe faces. So if we could redirect some of those expenditures to mining and development of our critical minerals and minerals more broadly to support industrial development, then that's going to have to be the key. But at the same time, I go back to my point, how do we do it smarter? How do we spend less to get the same outcome is what people are asking us to do as industry professionals, and we need the best and brightest kids. We need to make our industry attractive to young, bright kids who can help us transform and create a modern industry. And that means we have to work across the globe in different countries with those that have an advantage or a particular concentration of minerals and share and work together on a global basis. So as I said, Future Minerals Forum for me is an antidote to global fragmentation, and I think it's absolutely critical.
Patrick, let me move on to you. How are you seeing that financing capacity, and what are some of the barriers here when we look at perhaps even bringing the idea of enough profitable or attractive projects, or even getting investments to align? How are you looking at things?
That's getting at the core business of Wood Mackenzie, right? We advise governments, we advise banks, and we advise mining companies on investment decisions is a big part of our business, right? And I think I would say that the trouble is there's pretty much always more money than there are good investments, right? And so the number one thing that you have to do is focus on how do you make the investments a good investment, right? The invisible hand works, but sometimes it's a little bit slow, right? The feedback loop is a little bit too slow to move at the speed that we need to for the energy transition. And so a lot of what we're seeing is, there are some smart things that governments can do together with companies where it's having an impact, right? Where you can accelerate those incentives, you can create the conditions. there's CapEx things that you can do as a government or a company. You can reduce CapEx, you can address OpEx, you can address infrastructure, which ultimately affects both of those, is the main impact that it has. You can look at taxes, but the number one thing that is sort of free is actually things that you can do to de-risk and accelerate, right? And that's the thing where everybody actually wins. If you can find ways to reduce the risks associated with some of these investments by directing them to the right places, putting in place policies that make sense, having good collaborations and partnerships between countries and between companies, that's the number one and cheapest way to enable more money to flow in. Because if the best investment in the world is mining or processing, the money will arrive.
Before I get to, the topic of collaboration, especially when it comes to us moving from, reality, from vision to reality, Alda, I want to come to you here because Mark's brought in two points which actually quite tie in together here. He talks about, young people. And oftentimes in these conversations, as he mentioned, that you find young people looking for other industries that are perhaps a little more exciting than mining. And I'm curious here, when it comes to the Future Minerals Forum, do you find that the participation of young people is starting to become a lot more clearer, a lot more visible, and they actually want to participate in these conversations?
That's a great question because I'm seated here in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, a country that has, over the last 7 decades, focused on the petrochemicals industry. It's now looking, like many other countries, towards the minerals industry for its future development and diversification. So this is wonderful energy behind all that. It feels like we're at the beginnings of the minerals industry when everyone's enthusiastic about something new, something purposeful, that can make a positive impact. And so when you turn up to the Future Minerals Forum, you see a lot of young people wandering around, many of them university students or working for industries related to the minerals sector or unrelated industries and coming to have a look. And so I think you'll find in parts of the world where the minerals industry and the mining industry in particular is increasingly present and a source of prosperity, job opportunities, that you find that I would sense that young people will latch onto that. It's a different story perhaps in the more established mining jurisdictions and the customer world, where the perceptions of the sector tend to play against it. But if you were to go into, and Mark obviously can talk to this, but the mining of today is very different to the mining of 10 years ago, let alone 100 years ago. This is a future-looking industry where you're more likely to be sitting in an office with a joystick or some sort of control, managing huge equipment in very remote parts of your territory, thousands of kilometers away. So when we think about the mines of 2030, 2040, 2050, and the jobs that will require, it will be the jobs that will need people capable of handling big data analysts, yes, engineers, people that can mobilize drones. AI will be prevalent. And so you're looking at an industry that's unrecognizable, apart from moving dirt. It will be unrecognizable from its current state or past state. So if you want to make a positive difference to the world, if you're interested in addressing the climate challenge, if you're interested in providing opportunities to regional communities that would otherwise not have such opportunities, and mining jobs are good jobs, they're well-paying jobs, they give you a future, and the work you're doing will do benefit to the planet. So if you're thinking about making a positive difference, you've really got to consider this industry. Getting to university, getting you to your technical colleges, and if they're not there, well, the work we're doing in these sort of fora will hopefully over time enable you to have those opportunities. If not in your country, then we'll move you around in different parts of the region and bring you back so that you apply those skills back home.
Mark, I have to come to you here because Aldo sort of, gave a nice segue into, the idea around the youth. And I'm going to imagine that there are young people who are either watching this live broadcast or who will catch up with it over the next few days or so. Tapping into your institutional memory here, how has the mining industry of today changed from the way you remember it when you first stepped in?
I think we've developed a heart. And in many ways, it's what I saw when I started. I started in a coal mining village in Wollongong, or a bit north of Wollongong, which is in Australia. And the mine was very much part of the local community. Everybody knew each other, and everybody knew how important the mine was to that local community and to the local economy. And so for one graduate position or one role, there were 100 applications. And why I was very lucky to get to receive the offer. And what was great is you could actually work and do your university at the same time. And in mining, because the world, it's such a different world to what you grow in terms of that broader community, your ability to both work and do university gave you a running start and helped create a real enthusiasm for what you were doing. And so I do work with Camborne School of Mines. I'm involved in some work at Wollongong now, trying to save the university there from closing, the mining university I'm talking about, or the mining engineering degree. And it's about designing courses that suit the kids of today. So work, study, interaction, involvement, something more exciting than the experience we used in 38 or 48 years ago. I think we have to borrow some stuff from the past and put that in with new ideas, new concept, new involvement, more hands-on. We have to rebuild the way we put these courses together and make them attractive for kids. And Aldo was scratching at the point that I've got 7 kids and I've not been able to convince one of them to do mining, but I'm still hopeful because they're all now in their 20s and 30s saying, you know what, there might be an opportunity in electrical or in IT or in some of the software I'm developing. You could use this in the mines. We've got to make it relevant to the things that interest the kids today. And I think we can do a much better job in putting those pieces together. But it's about capturing people, talking them through, showing them what we've got available to, making it accessible, helping them to get through school, because I paid $114 a year to do university. Now, admittedly, 48 years ago, that's probably $100,000 a year these days. But it certainly wasn't as expensive as it is today in terms of putting myself through school. So we've also got to make it accessible for young kids. And I think we've got to rethink the whole structure of the way we're bringing kids into the industry.
Well, I'm sure a lot of young people will be paying attention to that response and, of course, actually want to participate a lot more closely with the Future Minerals Forum. Patrick, let me come to you here. In the discussion around a low-carbon future, there are ambitious targets. We tend to have climate conferences and various meetings talking about this. But where are we when it comes to the idea of, balancing the cost and the risk? Are we getting anywhere closer to what that balance looks like? Or is it still one of the things where, the commitments and the targets are theoretically available, the pathways are there, but we're still struggling with these two things around cost and risk?
Yeah, I don't think we're quite there, right? Or we would see more money flowing into these investments, which we talked about a little bit before. But I think there are some tailwinds that we can really leverage here, which is, the commitments that governments have made are stimulating a huge amount of technological innovation, right? They're stimulating a lot of investment. They are facilitating to a certain extent some of the financing, right? That is it was contentious, but there was, arguably some good news coming out of the COP meetings, last month, around making some finance available. Is it enough? Probably not, right? But there is significant progress being made. There are commitments that are yielding some results. And I think there's cause for optimism on that. And maybe just to kind of add one point to the question around the youth, I think some of the people that we see getting involved in the mining industry are people that are really passionate about the energy transition, because it's the front lines. They're the people that care about economic development of countries, because it's the front lines, right? If you actually care about that, you can get on a soapbox and preach about it, or you can go to the front lines and you can try to get the balance right, and it's not easy, right? And dealing with those risks, which are real, is a challenge. But the commitment that we're seeing, increasing collaboration in many cases between governments and private companies is happening. The conversations are getting better. They're more educated. They're more focused on reality and the real points of negotiation rather than random issues. So we're seeing progress. I'll be honest, I don't think it's fast enough. We have to accelerate. We don't have time to waste.
Let's move to the idea of sentiment, because I think that's one of the other topics that has come through quite a bit in our discussion. And quite interestingly, the report notes that the sentiment trends across various critical minerals is generally positive, especially when we deal with lithium, graphite, and nickel versus what we're seeing in cobalt. And when we dig deeper underneath the surface of this particular part of the report, it talks about how the super region has demonstrated more favorable mining sentiment versus global averages. Mark, Aldo, Patrick, when you think about the stat that's coming through this report, the statement, does that surprise you, or is it generally in line with what you would have been expecting, given the fact that we've been talking around the idea of value addition for quite some time? We've been talking about critical minerals for quite some time. Let's start with you, Mark, around your view when it comes to the statement around sentiment.
I think it's a really important point. A young author, William Pitron, wrote a book, The Rare Metals War. I see Patrick smiling. He's obviously read it. And William was explaining to me, he started to write a book about the mining industry, and his first thought was it was probably going to be a negative book, talking about some of the bad experiences in mining. But he said once he got about 50% of the way through writing the book, he recognized that we need minerals for everything. And he hadn't appreciated that we can't support 8 billion people on the planet without the minerals industry. And so the second half of the book, he talks about the responsibility of his country, France, in supporting the minerals industry and also doing some mining themselves, because they said we only take up 0.3% of the Earth's surface to make life possible, and our products shrink our human footprint by 30%. So we're the single most environmentally positive industry on the face of the planet. And he said, nobody knows it. And he said, how do you guys tell your story differently? Because he said, I was going to write a book where I was critical of the industry. In the end, he said, I had to go and say to my French colleagues, we need to be doing more mining and pulling our weight and supporting the world in developing and providing a better life for everyone. And we're not doing enough. So how do we get that message through? As an industry, we have to tell our story. We have to make it easy to digest and understand. And we have to make sure that when people do come into touch with mining and mining operations, it's a positive experience. And we've got a lot more to do in telling our story, doing our work better, and making sure that people do understand that we are partners. We need to be partners in the future. And again, Patrick's conversation about how do you connect all those dots, really important. And again, the Future Minerals Forum, I hope, will help showcase how we can pull all those pieces together. I know that that's what Aldo's trying to achieve in sponsoring these types of conversations.
Aldo, your thoughts on this chapter that looks at the global trends in sentiment?
I think what you're seeing is a distinction between the supplier countries and in large part the customer countries. Although there's those countries in between. So if you're looking at Africa, if you're looking at Latin America, what the analysis is showing that you're more likely to the sentiment is more likely to equate mining with opportunity, right? And so that's a good sign. If that's the way communities or young people in particular are perceiving the sector. But considering the opportunity, they also, what the analysis shows, they're very much interested in ensuring that mining is done in a responsible way. You probably get a different take on this in what we call customer countries, where the perceptions of the industry is perhaps not as positive. And so from our perspective, where we sit in this forum and the conversations we have amongst the leaders and governments, that gives us I think a good starting point for talking about the mining industry of the future, or value addition, building on the goodwill or the positive perspectives of local communities. Or this one of the key challenges that we face, let me put it this way, is that unless communities welcome mining into their area and are willing to embrace the mines, the sector, and tolerate its presence, if I could put it that way, then mining won't happen, right? Because communities have the power in many countries to say yes or no to mineral projects, right? And we have many examples of where that's actually led to conflict in parts of the world, in Latin America and other places. So if we have a situation where communities are predisposed to be supportive of mining, and it seems that to a significant extent that's the case in parts of Africa, maybe even in Latin America as well and other places, then that's something that the industry and governments really needs to take seriously and build upon, and ensure whatever is developed, whether it be infrastructure or mines themselves, are done in a way that, on the one hand, minimizes impact on local environments, and that maximize benefits to people, and local people in particular, who live within the vicinity of the mines, and not just those in the capital cities. So it provides us some good insights on which to build upon, and also some points to reflect on. How do we shift those perceptions, as Mark alludes to, in parts of the world where the mineral sector is not regarded in a positive way.
Patrick, let me get your thoughts here, and perhaps you can, tie it in with some of the aspects that Aldo's brought in here, and to what extent perhaps it's an issue of transparency as well, in terms of having communities wanting to, trust in the idea of, minerals research and development and that type of stuff, and changing that public perception. To what extent does transparency then play a big role?
It plays a huge role, right? I mean, I think it's interesting. Mark mentioned the 5,000 years of history or longer of mining, and to be perfectly fair, most of that history, mining didn't perform very well in terms of benefiting local communities or governments and things like that. That's a fairly new development, so we've got a lot of work to do to earn that trust, and it's only going to happen if there are transparent, real benefits at the local level, at the national level, right, and at the regional level. And transparency is a key part of that, making sure you get the calculus right so that the net benefits are really positive, right? We started this conversation, at least my part of it, talking about governments that get policy wrong. A lot of them chase the wrong portions of value addition, right? If they're looking for taxes, and that's what you really need in your country, pushing a copper smelter is not going to happen, right? It's not going to make it happen because it's going to be low margin. It's unlikely to be very profitable. It's going to be a challenge unless you're in one of the couple of places in the world where it can happen, right? So it comes back to the point of, hey, we have to make sure that the things we're pushing and prioritizing really are going to deliver benefits. That takes companies to commit. It takes governments to get it right. And where that partnership happens, and we're dealing with reality, and we're have a chance to really be competitive, then you can actually generate sustainable benefits in the long run. Mark mentioned this earlier. Sustainability isn't just about environmental. It's also about being profitable enough to keep performing well in the longer term. That has to be part of the equation. And where it's not, the benefits aren't going to be there, and the social contract is going to erode. And so everybody really does have to earn their part of the contract, or it's just not going to work.
With just a couple of minutes left to this broadcast, Mark, let me come to you here. As we wrap up the conversation, put a bow on things and have a lot of the viewers read this report, given everything we've discussed so far over the past 50 minutes or so, what's the one thing you want the viewer to take away, not just from our conversation, but from this report?
We can connect, create partnerships, and resource the critical minerals we need to drive energy transition. And it's not just the energy transition, it's development of a better society by working together. At Quellaveco in Peru, government roundtable with the local community, they asked for 26 projects to be completed to support the development of Quellaveco. That was the deal that we did. That was the commitment. That project was delivered after 5 years, on time, on schedule, first time, 20 years, 4,000 meters in the Andes. A great example of how we can do it together. It's possible, it's been done. That's what we've got to do to make sure that we drive towards the energy transition and a whole range of other opportunities to make the world a better place.
Aldo, let me come to you here. Knowing that the Future Minerals Forum is built on 5 strategic pillars, the ministerial roundtables, the engagement, the impact, this report, which we've discussed, as well as influence, what should people look out for as we build up to next year?
I think the key word will be partnership. How we work together to achieve what we've discussed today. And turn that partnerships into some form of reality. And partnerships will be key in a complex, geopolitically fraught world. We're talking about countries being willing to work together, finding places where they feel comfortable in doing so. To Mark's phrase, in a divided world, what role can we play in bridging those gaps? Unless we do that, it's going to be difficult to deliver these minerals. So in terms of a key message, by the way, the report we're talking about is this. And the key message here is that the Future Minerals Forum is really about shaping the future of minerals, right? And what that means is delivering the minerals the world will need for development, for the energy transition. Those are the key global challenges, and minerals are central to addressing those.
Patrick, your thoughts as we wrap up?
Yeah, just echoing what Aldo said. I mean, I think shaping the future of minerals and achieving this energy transition is going to be a team sport. It has to be, right? In some cases, it's going to be a proper team sport with everybody, partnering together. In some cases, it's going to have to be a bit of a relay race on certain commodities, right? Where you're handing over from one country to another. You're still part of the same team, or you could be if you're sharing value so everybody benefits, right? But in order to have that team operate as a team, you've got to get together, you've got to be talking, you've got to be looking for common ground, you've got to be finding ways to solve your partner's problems, right? You got to understand them. That doesn't happen on, I know we're on Zoom today, but it doesn't happen on Zoom, right? That has to happen face to face.
Patrick, thank you so much for those words. And we've gotten 3 analogies from you so far in this discussion: team sport, relay, and skinny jeans. So I do hope that the viewers found the conversation enlightening. That's where we wrap up the discussion for today. Thank you so much to my guests for joining me. Unfortunately, one participant wasn't able to join us, and that was Dr. Michelle Voss, who's a fellow in energy, minerals, and materials at Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy. But a huge thank you to Aldo Panini. He's the Director of Strategy, Program and Content at the Future Minerals Forum. And of course, we had Mark Kudifani, who is the Chairman of Vale Base Metals, and Patrick Barnes, who is the Global Head of Metals and Mining Consulting at Wood Mackenzie. From myself, Nastasia Arendse, and the rest of the CNBC Africa team, it's a goodbye for now.